My uncle and aunt visited me in Atlanta last winter. We talked for hours about normal family things. Somewhere in the middle of that long conversation, we slipped onto the topic of strange events. My uncle is not a man who likes tall tales, so when he said he carried one memory that would stay with him until the day he dies, I opened my laptop and began to type. He nodded, smiled a little, and told me to warn anyone who reads this that it is only the voice of an old man, and that some parts might sound impossible. He started by explaining how he finished school at Fordham University in 1974. Back then, good work was easy to find. Firms wrote letters and even phoned the students asking them to come in. He did not want a life at a stuffy desk, so he waited for something that felt right. The moment came during a Thanksgiving flight to visit my aunt. While looking down at the shining dots of planes sliding across the night sky, he fell in love with air traffic control. He liked the steady voices, the moving lights, all of it. By his 27th birthday, he had passed every exam and was allowed to work without another controller standing over his shoulder. The first posting was never a choice for rookies. Instead of a famous airport like JFK or Hartsfield-Jackson, he got Atlantic, Iowa. People often confuse the Atlantic with the ocean, but it is only a small farm town. The airport there had one short runway pressed between endless rows of corn. Day workers went home at 5 in the evening, yet the tower stayed open until 4 in the morning. Many routes crossed the sky above, so a broken plane might need to drop in at any moment. My uncle sat alone in the glass room at the top, while a guard named Joe slept downstairs by the empty ticket desks. Most hours were silent. He passed long nights by reading thick paperbacks and working crossword puzzles. He also spent many nights whispering on the phone to my aunt. People like to say air traffic control is brutal on the nerves. In Atlantic, he was bored almost the whole time. Only once in a while, a tiny Cessna would call from the dark and ask for help to land. That quiet routine rolled on until the middle of February 1979. On February 20th, the wind howled through the flat fields, yet there was no snow. He was scheduled to keep watch until closing. No flights were on the board, so he expected nothing but boredom. At 1 in the morning, a small Cessna radioed from about 30 miles north. A heavy storm over Omaha forced the pilot to search for a safer strip. My uncle pulled out his binoculars, checked visibility, and started guiding the craft down. The landing looked rough in the crosswind, yet the wheels touched without trouble. He raised the glasses for one more look and froze. A woman was walking up the runway. She wore a thin summer dress, no coat, no shoes, as if the air were warm. It was below freezing. Worse, nobody could explain how she reached the middle of an active strip in the first place. Puzzled, my uncle grabbed the microphone and called the Cessna. "Do you see a woman on the runway?" he asked. The pilot sounded calm but surprised and stepped out to check. In the binoculars, my uncle watched him approach her, speak, and lean forward as she brought her mouth close to his ear. They stayed that way for 10 long seconds, neither person moving. Then the pilot snapped upright, spun, and sprinted back to his plane. The propeller spun to life. My uncle barked over the radio, ordering him to wait, but the pilot ignored every call. The little plane raced down the strip and climbed into the night. Static filled the radio. In the hiss, he caught pieces of words, then one clear command: run. The signal went dead. He leaned back, trying to make sense of what he had heard, and then remembered the woman. When he raised the binoculars again, she was facing the tower, 200 yards away. Eyes opened so wide they looked painful. With no hint of snow beneath her feet, she started running straight at him. He had weathered 6 years in Vietnam and thought fear no longer owned him. Yet something about that figure sprinting through the night sent ice through his chest. He called Joe, the guard, but no answer came. He glanced down just in time to see the front door of the tower slam open. Instinct pushed him toward the small bathroom beside the radar racks. He locked himself in. Outside, chaos exploded. Equipment crashing, drawers slamming, the quick thump of feet. Once a violent bang struck the bathroom door so hard the handle shook. Then, total silence settled. He stayed hidden until dawn's orange light leaked under the door. At 7:45, the day controller Clark arrived, cursed loudly, and opened the door for him. The control room looked wrecked. Radio panels lay torn from their mounts. Screens were smashed. Paper covered every inch of the floor. Police took statements and shook their heads. Repairs lasted 11 days. Joe was fired for sleeping on duty. Cameras were discussed, but not installed right away. My uncle convinced himself that the intruder must have been a mentally ill woman from a nearby town. The story grew weaker in his mind until it felt half real, half nightmare. He returned on March 4th. Nights stayed calm through the rest of February and into early March. Snow kept falling. One evening near the end of another shift, a private jet called from 50 miles out. Turbulence and ice forced them to seek an immediate landing. The jet was larger than anything the Atlantic Strip usually handled, yet emergencies bent the rules. He gave clearance and watched the snow swirling outside the glass. Then, like a ghost, she appeared again. She stepped onto the far end of the runway, barefoot as before, the thin dress fluttering against white flakes. Somehow, her face pointed right at him. Her eyes, still stretched wide, did not blink. He realized that in the earlier encounter she had never closed them once. 2 full minutes passed while she stared and never let those lids drop. He ordered the jet to hold altitude, but the pilot refused. They could not stay up in the rough air. He granted permission, heart pounding, knowing the woman now stood only 100 feet from the tower door. Against orders, he ran downstairs and locked the outside handle, then hurried back to his console. From the window, the runway looked empty. Maybe she had already slipped away. The jet announced final approach. At that instant, something crashed against the downstairs door. Metal squealed. He stared at the radio because looking anywhere else felt impossible. Heavy steps climbed the tower stairs, each footfall angrily loud, as though someone slammed the soul into the metal with purpose. He kept his voice level and cleared the jet to land. Behind him, the office door creaked open. Every part of him wanted to run, yet he could not even turn his head. Cold breath brushed his neck. He felt lips stop an inch from his ear. A whisper slid out, "Come down to the field." The tone was not loud, but carried thick anger, colder than the winter wind outside. The jet touched down safely and began to taxi. The breath faded. The footsteps retreated, rapid at first, then gone. He forced himself to turn, saw the empty doorway, and managed to call the guard. Together, they searched every floor. No sign of her. Officers arrived and combed the tower, the runway, and the corn beyond the wire fence. They found a single line of barefoot prints leading from the field to the tower. No prints returned to the field. Snow kept falling, soft enough to record new marks, yet nothing else appeared. He feared people would believe he had been drinking on duty. He felt sure the woman was real, not a ghost, though he could not explain how she moved or why. With no real proof, he kept most of the details to himself. Spring came early that year. By April, the snow melted and green stalks poked up in the fields. He convinced himself the horror had died with winter. On a warm night in late April, a freight carrier voiced trouble with an engine. They needed to drop fast. He guided them down, confident again, until motion on the tarmac stole his focus. There she was under the yellow floodlights, skin gray now, dress hanging in shreds. Her hair clung wet to her cheeks, though rain had not fallen for days. A fuel truck driver stood frozen near his cab. She touched his sleeve, whispered, and the driver stumbled back, climbed into the cab, and sped from the grounds. The truck's horn wailed across the flat land, fading inside corn rows. My uncle called Joe's replacement, but the new guard was out inspecting a gate. Alone once more, he felt the tower vibrate as the woman began to climb the iron stairs on the outside of the shaft. The steps were bolted to the wall like a fire escape. He heard the clang of bare feet on steel. The freight carrier's pilot kept talking, asking for final corrections. My uncle delivered instructions in a thin breath while looking up at the ceiling hatch that opened to the outer platform. Each clang grew louder until he knew she was a step away. The hatch lifted. Wind rushed in, yet it seemed weaker than the chill already inside the room. Her head appeared first, tilted, eyes even wider than before. She crawled through the opening on hands and knees, skin blue from cold, though the air was mild. As she stood, she never looked at the equipment or the lights. She looked only at him. The freight plane touched down with a roar that rattled glass. The woman flinched, turned, and walked across the room. Her bare foot pressed onto a splintered screen, sliced open, but she did not slow. Blood left small circles behind her. She climbed onto the opposite sill and stepped out onto nothing, falling past the windows and disappearing into the dark. Officers and medics came after the plane had parked. They searched under the tower with flashlights. There was no body, no blood beneath the windows, no drag marks. Only the spots of blood inside the control room proved she had stood there at all. Those stains never washed out completely. Maintenance painted over them, but the dark shape always bled through. My uncle finished his story by saying he served at that airport for 6 more months before transferring to Idaho. He never saw the woman again. Sometimes on nights when sleep will not come, he still hears the thin clang of feet on a metal stair and feels cold breath on his skin. He wonders if the woman was flesh or something older, something that borrowed a human shape because it helped her move closer to whoever happened to look out of a certain glass tower in a lonely field of corn. He admits he will never know, yet each time winter rolls across the Midwest, he opens the news and checks small-town papers for odd reports. So far, he has found nothing, and that silence haunts him even more. He leaned back, folded his hands, and stared at the floor until the last words settled in the room. My aunt touched his shoulder and told him the coffee had gone cold, but he did not seem to notice. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and suddenly felt the weight of an Iowa night I had never seen. My uncle has lived a full life, but when he recalls those hours in the tower, his voice still shakes like radio static on a frozen runway.